I want to begin today with a question that really Pope Francis is posing throughout the whole course of the document Fratelli Tutti, in terms of what kind of politics do we need today, and for us, particularly in this room, what could a better politics look like? As has been heard, this isn't a question about party politics. It's about how we organise our common life, how we care for one another, how we decide who counts and how power is used, whether that's to protect, to serve or to exclude, as we've seen in certain instances. And Pope Francis explains that a better politics is one that's truly at the service of the common good, one that makes room for everyone, including those who are most vulnerable, and shows respect for different cultures. He describes politics as a noble vocation, something that doesn't always get the best reputation, I think, in our society. Not a necessary evil, but an act of love and service that upholds high principles. And this vision of politics might seem surprising somewhat in today's climate, but Pope Francis isn't alone in his view, and Pope Paul VI once said that politics is a demanding manner of living the Christian commitment to the service of others, and I think we see that expressed throughout the whole of Fratelli Tutti. So what could a better politics look like? First of all, a better politics, I'm sure we'd all agree, starts with encounter, real, humble listening and recognising the dignity of others, even when we disagree. Pope Francis teaches that politics is something that we don't impose, it's something that we build together. And too often, however, we suffer not just from political division, but from a relational poverty. We've forgotten, or indeed never learned or been taught or modelled, how to be relational. In my own area of Greater Manchester and Lancashire, there are some positive examples in those communities where relationships are fostered. And I see, through, for example, the community sponsorship programmes of refugees that have led to strong, enduring connections as parishes and schools provide resettlement assistance and create space for dialogue and for mutual support. But in other places, relationships can be reduced to mere transactions, which breed mistrust. And if we're honest, the church too, I feel, sometimes has failed to nurture spaces of encounter. And therefore, I think what Pope Francis is saying is that we must be brave enough to seek those relationships and hold space for calm, fact-based and human relations, even where fear can dominate. Almost 12 months ago in Southport, 3 young lives were tragically lost. And following that, there were riots that were fueled by misinformation and fear, particularly directed towards people seeking asylum. And those riots spread to different parts of the country, even very close to where our Caritas Salford office is. And I think that this tragic event shows the importance of building stronger relationships within our communities. A better politics, a relational politics, might have perhaps prevented some of this violence if there'd been stronger community relationships, if misinformation had been met with trusted voices, and if neighbourliness had been nurtured from the start, perhaps things, please God, could have turned out differently. And this brings me to another facet of how we can perhaps consider politics and the politics of relationship, particularly towards community organising, something that I've learned a great deal about through my role in Salford and that I've come to believe in very strongly. Community organising teaches us to build power relationally, not just transactionally. It begins with listening and with trust. And in Greater Manchester and in a kind of nascent stage in Lancashire, churches, mosques, synagogues, schools and unions have come and are coming together to campaign for various different aspects of social justice, whether that be for living wage, fair housing, and for the protection of people seeking refuge or asylum. And these initiatives are born of listening, understanding and recognising that politics must begin where people live. Pope Francis talks a lot in Fratelli Tutti about social love. It's not an abstract compassion, but a commitment to fraternity that recognises the worth of every person, especially those on the margins. And it moves beyond charity to true solidarity, which includes the desire and the need for structural change and shared struggle. He talks a lot about the reform of institutions at local, regional, national and international level. So Fratelli Tutti also challenges us to ask who's making decisions and for whom. We meet people every day through our organisation who are facing food insecurity, unstable housing and mental health struggles, not because of poor choices, but because the system often fails them. Francis critiques those in power who seek to dominate and calls for true politics that upholds high principles, focusing on long-term common good. He notes many grassroots organisations compensate for the shortcomings of the state and that they work tirelessly together for the common good. In our own communities, we often see this in the work of grassroots organisations advocating for social justice, economic sustainability and the protection of various different groups and peoples. But these movements, while positive, remain incomplete, and we must go beyond listening to action, empowering people to shape policy and not just to speak. I also want to sound a word of caution. Pope Francis warns us about the tone of populism and how political life is often reduced to slick marketing that discredits others. We're often witnessing in our culture in the UK a culture that narrows those who belong, who reduces complex issues to blame and division and elevates control over compassion. This is why we must champion a political culture rooted not in fear but in fraternity, one that seeks politics as a service to the common good, not as a battleground for personal interests. Political love may sound idealistic, but it is essential. And Pope Francis reminds us that that love is not confined to private life. It's also expressed in social, economic and political structures. Political love can shape society in a way that honours the dignity of every person, especially those who are left out. This love can drive that community organising, can challenge us to change systems that leave people hungry, seeks calm in moments of grief and fear, and demands we take lived experiences seriously, not just to hear them, but to let them shape and transform our structures. This is not soft compassion, it's rigorous, it's courageous commitment to the common good, but sometimes a bit messy, not always linear or straightforward, and for someone who is occasionally prone to periods of impatience, can be a struggle. So when we ask what could a better politics look like, it looks like political love, a politics where people talk with one another, not just about one another, where power is shared and not hoarded, and a politics that starts with encounter, sustained by loving relationships, shaped by that love. We see glimpses of this in various different aspects of community work, community organising, parish engagement, and interfaith work. It's not perfect, but it is growing. And if we're serious about the gospel, we must be serious about this work in practice. Pope Francis says, for when the good of others is at stake, good intentions are not enough. And we must ask ourselves, what are we doing for the good of others? Not just a voter or as a Catholic, but as a neighbour. Politics is not someone else's problem, it's our shared vocation to create a society of mercy, truth, justice and peace. And I believe that a better politics is not only possible, but it is already beginning. Thanks very much. Thank you.